Depuis 2018, Aran Résidence Réseau national collabore avec On the Move pour développer ses actions de coopérations internationales. La première étape, dont le résultat va vous être présenté par Marie Le Sourd, secrétaire générale d'On the Move, a consisté à repérer, puis entrer en contact avec différents réseaux de résidences nationaux et internationaux dont les activités font écho à celles portées par Aran Résidence. Ce travail s'est déroulé dans le cadre de la formation Paris, parcours d'accompagnement et de réflexion sur l'international, coordonné par On the Move pour le ministère de la Culture et l'Institut français, programme auquel Aran Résidence a pu participer. Ainsi, depuis mi-2019, nous avons pu étudier ensemble les spécificités de chaque réseau, leurs objectifs, leurs enjeux, leur contexte. Nous avons également partagé avec eux des constats, échangé des bonnes pratiques. Autrement dit, nous avons entamé un travail collaboratif et une réflexion partagée que nous poursuivrons les mois et les années à venir. Avant de te passer la parole, Marie, je te présente rapidement. Donc, tu coordonnes le réseau On the Move depuis 2012. Auparavant, Marie Le Sourd, tu as été en charge du programme des échanges culturels de la Fondation Europe-Asie à Singapour de 1999 à 2006. Puis, de 2006 à 2011, tu as dirigé le Centre culturel français de Yogyakarta en Indonésie. On the Move, OTM, diffuse gratuitement et régulièrement des opportunités de mobilité culturelle et des possibilités de financement sur son site internet, ses réseaux sociaux et dans ses lettres d'information mensuelles, qui sont d'ailleurs très riches et très bien fournies. On the Move co-réalise des guides gratuits et des documents de référence sur la mobilité culturelle et sur des sujets connexes. On the Move, il traite par exemple également des défis liés à la mobilité culturelle par le biais de rapports et de rencontres professionnelles. Vous organisez aussi et vous facilitez des événements pour les adhérents et les partenaires d'On the Move. Autrement dit, je donne ce conseil à toutes les personnes qui nous écoutent. N'hésitez pas à vous connecter sur le site onthemove.org pour y retrouver toutes ces informations très précieuses. Marie, merci beaucoup pour ta présence. Je te donne le micro. Bonne présentation.
Merci beaucoup Chloé. Donc, comme il a été dit, je vais parler en anglais. Non pas que mon anglais soit formidable, mais au moins pour tous les Français francophones, comme j'ai un fort accent français, ça sera facile à suivre. Et on a aussi le travail formidable des interprètes, qui est un travail que j'ai toujours admiré, mais d'autant plus dans ce contexte. Donc, merci pour cela. Et je le fais aussi parce que, en fait, c'est plus une présentation, un petit peu discussion, parce qu'on a quand même la chance d'avoir Lee O'Loughlin, donc la présidente du réseau Residences, qui peut me rejoindre pour cette session. Donc voilà, pendant 1 heure, en termes d'hospitalité numérique, comme on est toutes les deux, je pense que, et bien sûr avec toi Chloé, je pense que c'est bien aussi qu'on ait cet échange en anglais et ensuite de toute façon il y a la traduction simultanée. So thank you very much. And thank you very much to Lee to join as well this session, which was, as we say at the beginning of this meeting this morning, I mean, this colloquium was supposed to be live, I would say, in Paris in March, and with all our colleagues coming from different places in the world, and then it moved basically more in a contextualized way in Paris, and then now online. So we try to have more people joining, but yeah, agenda are very busy. So I'm very glad that Lee, you can join us, and you were already here this morning, but maybe we will delve a little bit more into the action of Residences. So basically what we will do during this hour is more to share indeed, as Chloe was mentioning, what we have been doing with Aran Résidence. So basically this connection with some of, some networks, but also platforms related to residency, either at an international level, like Residences, or other acting at a national level. And after we will share as well with you some of the projects that this platform and network are working at, and also the key challenge that they face. And last but not least, on kind of project that eventually they could develop together in order to support further the role of residency organization, also to better support particularly in this challenging time, but also in the future, artists and cultural professionals in residency. So I will leave the word to Lee a little bit later, but first I will share my screen, and thanks for, so I think now it should work. So I will just introduce very briefly. So what we try to do is more like to provide really key information and maybe like to pinpoint some specificity of this platform or network. I guess that some of you you are already aware of them, but you know it's also sometimes good to be reminded of some online information platform. And in the different session today, we could also hear that how important as well it's to have access to information and to have access to form of support. So I will start with Transartist. So Transartist, basically, it's a huge database of artist residency program. So Transartist really share, I would say, an expertise on the international artists in residency program, and also related issue linked to mobility and the role of cultural relation, the role of cultural organization in this regard. So they have a huge database of more than 1,500 residency. So here, of course, you cannot click directly, but when you go on the website, you can really also look for residency based, you know, on location in the world, or based on specific discipline, but also based on specific topic, for instance, science, technology, or residency working on environmental subject, for instance. As a residency organizer, you can also upload your information if your residency has an open call, which can be open more like with a regional or international scope. What is interesting also in the work that we do with Art en Résidence, it's also that we try to see the kind of governance and the kind of business model, to use a big name, of this organization, and how they thrive and how they further develop. What is interesting with Transartist is that it used to be an independent organization, an independent association founded by somebody that some of you may know, Maria Turlings, in the 90s. And after a few years ago, in fact, it was embedded in an organization called Dutch Culture, that is the National Cultural Institute for the Netherlands. So it's, even though the functioning is different, but it's more or less the equivalent of Institut Français in the Netherlands. So they are really funded via a subsidy from the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also of the Dutch Ministry of Education, Culture and Science. And there are like two people working for this organization, including Bojana Panevska, who was with us in one of the meetings that we had also with Art en Résidence. The other organization that I wanted to mention to you, it's, so here we go a little bit, you know, like toward the West. So it's in the US, it's a US-based organization, which is called the Alliance of Artist Communities. And they started back also, it's more like the 90s as well, when it was founded. And the Alliance include more than 400 organizations and individuals, mostly in US states, so basically in 50 US states, but also internationally in 20 countries. And what is interesting is that in terms of business model as well, is that they develop, I mean, they work also based on the membership fee of their member. So here it's more an alliance, a network. Transartist was more a platform of information. So here they also relate on the membership fee of their member, but also they develop partnership with, for instance, in the US, as some of you may know, there is a huge role of private foundations. So they develop a lot of partnership with US foundation. And with this partnership, they will also help to fund some of the initiative of their member. For instance, I will just give an example, which has also an international component. They just the Alliance of Artists Community just got private funding, I mean a partnership with the McKnight Foundation, and with this funding it will allow them to support some of the alumni of this foundation, and also to support residency organization, part of their network, to welcome these artists. So it's quite of interesting model as well, and they have about like 6 people working for the alliance. Then we move back to Europe with Italy, the network of residency. Here we are in another model. I mean, I would say in terms of development, it started a bit at the same time as Art en Résidence. So basically, the network has not yet a legal entity. They are working on it right now. They are working with a small group of Italian residency to create this identity, which can be this legal entity, sorry, which could be, for instance, an association and most probably a non-for-profit organization, because with this legal entity, they want also to represent better the sector, and also like to further engage and further develop the dialogue that they have been implemented with the Ministry of Culture in Italy. Their business model so far was also while trying to develop partnership with a foundation. For instance, in the past, they had a support from the private foundation, Cariplo Foundation. And here again, it was also like to support their member to develop a particular project. Right now, they have 2 persons working full-time for this network, and they have about 100 members in Italy, but also 40 members internationally. And even though the discipline can be quite diverse, but there is a stronger focus on visual art. So that's why as well I find some commonalities with Art en Résidence. 2 last one before I pass the word to Lee. So Taiwan Art Space Alliance. So this morning you had, unfortunately, Catherine had some problem to join the conversation via Zoom, but you had also a presentation. I mean, you have this video link also, maybe it can be shared again in the chat, presenting Taiwan Art Space Alliance. Here we are also in a very recent type of alliance network, so at the level of Taiwan, which links artist residency organization, artist run space collective, or artist village, like the Taipei Artist Village, for instance. They have 45 members, half of them are organization, the other half is individual. They have 2 persons working full-time for this network, and they are supported, I mean, financially supported by the Ministry of Culture in Taiwan, and also the National Arts and Culture Foundation in Taiwan. So what is interesting as well is that they really try through this network to build the capacity of their member in gaining as well, you know, more visibility and strengthening, you know, the residency program in Taiwan, but they are also very connected to the Asian region, and they really try as well like to have more international connections through this network. Then we go to Art en Résidence, of course. I just wanted also to highlight some common points, and even though Art en Résidence, I mean, many of you today know about it, there was a presentation also this morning, but I just wanted to highlight also to link it to other network and platform that were introduced before. What I wanted to highlight is that in terms of governance, among all these platforms, even though some of them, including Res Artists, works with very limited human resources, so basically a very small team, but Art en Résidence is more working on a voluntary basis. So this is also a kind of, you know, interesting also like to think of sharing experience on governance model as well. This is a big question, I would say. And really the specificity of Art en Résidence also in comparison with the different network, it's also this the dimension of the charter that you have been developing and that you have also evolves through the network. and which is also quite interesting, both to, I would say, like build the capacity of the member of our en résidence to work on residency program, but also it's a way to protect, I would say, and to support the working condition of artists. So even though it's a very contextualized type of charter in the French context, I guess this was also one point of interest for other residency network and platform that we will continue to further exchange on in our future discussions. So now I spoke a lot, but I will pass the word to Lee to introduce a little bit as well Residences, because this morning was very short, so maybe you want to highlight some key points as well about Residences, and also to connect also to my previous points, maybe also this definition and the value that you put as well behind the term of residency, considering that you are also like this unique worldwide network of residency organization. Thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you, Marie. So just to talk a little bit about Residences, our history and background is actually intimately intertwined with trans artists. We were both founded by Maria Turnings, and at the same time, trans artists to focus on support and being a platform of information for artists, and Residences to be a supportive mechanism for arts organizations or organizations who are providing residency opportunities. So there is a combined history there. So whereas trans artists, as you've pointed out, ended up being funded governmentally, Residences has always been primarily funded by member subscriptions, originally with some seed funding from Europe, because we're a Dutch foundation, and then, you know, through various parts in our history, we've had bits of European funding, but we've always, as a business model, always had a membership, subscriber membership process. So yes, so we're 27 years old. We're a Dutch foundation with an international board. We have the office in Amsterdam, and we also have a Southern Hemisphere office in Melbourne, Australia. And we're going through a number of organizational governance changes ourselves at the moment. So we are in the process. So next year, the Amsterdam office will close, and in fact, our office will move to Finland, our European office. So that is a partnership with the city of E. And so we're working with the municipality of E there. And we have a Finnish staff member who will be shared between Residences and the mayor's office, which is really exciting. Yeah, Finland will become our new European office hub, and the headquarters will move to our existing Melbourne, Australia office, which is where our executive director and membership manager are. So that's sort of our quick structural governance that we have. Residences has a board which is taken both from our international membership and also from individuals who are dedicated to our mission and values. Our mission, very simply, is dedicated to the professionalization and furtherance of artist residency field. And our values are incredibly important to us, and they include sustainability, both environmental and organizational. Okay. I had a bit of a blank then, as well as, oh, it's on our website, and I've just had that is very embarrassing. Professionalism, diversity, transparency, and sustainability. So there are 4 values, which I should know off by heart, so my apologies for having a mental blank. So something that is of interest in terms of our international membership. So pre-COVID, we had over 700 organizational members in 85 countries around the world. We're during COVID at the moment. So it's not just residency organizations who have been affected by the current pandemic. It is, of course, our networks as well, and Residences is the same. So at the moment, we actually have 585 current member organizations worldwide. 63% of those are European based. 20% are in the Americas. And then the rest is a mix between sort of Asia, Oceania, and Africa. We did have a presence in the Middle East. We had an office in Tehran, but unfortunately we had to close that office due to the pandemic earlier this year. So that's us as an organization. I don't want to take too much time, but basically what we are focused on is helping our members to professionalize and have sustainable enterprises. So that ranges from providing support insofar as best practice contracts, working with artists, working internationally, through to more conceptual discussions about the role of residencies that they might play, the diversity, the complexity of hosting, the diversity of different types of residencies, really quite a broad range of things that we deal with. Our primary activities are the RÉSIDENCES website. So our website has a listing of all of our member organizations, and those member organizations post their open calls, for example, on the website. The website is the largest visited website for artist residencies, so we get over 4 million visitors a year. And we also have quite huge following in terms of our Facebook pages and social media. So we're actually quite established in those digital networks in terms of getting our messages out there. The things that we primarily focus on are, or that we're known very much for, are our in-person conferences. So we have at least one a year, which is a major global conference about artist residencies. Unfortunately, we've not been able to host one this year, and we've not been as brave as Arts en Résidence and done it online. We've actually postponed our 2020 conference to 2021, which will be in September 2021 in Bangkok. So every year it's at a different location in the world with a different partner who is an organization who provides artist residencies. So we're very much looking forward to that conference, which the focus of which is defining the next decade. So really looking at the massive changes that have taken place. So that we run those conferences every year. We've previously done focuses, for example, on climate change and environmental sustainability, First Nation and Indigenous representation and lack of representation in residencies field, both in terms of staff and artists. We work across we've done digital residencies, sort of that idea of futures. So every conference we host has a particular focus. Alongside that, we do a lot of e-learning and digital learning. So at the moment, we've just finished a series of 5 online open access conversations, and they've ranged from contracts and very practical discussions about what organizations should be doing now in light of COVID and how they should be looking at working their artist contracts, through to looking at more conceptual discussions as well. So we do those things, and the big thing that we have at the moment for the next 2 years is really focusing on the impact of COVID-19, the pandemic, on the international residencies sector. I'm aware that I'm rubbing on a bit, Marie, so if you want me to stop there, I will. Otherwise, I could go on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lee, and we will have this little ping-pong exchange for the next step. But thank you very much, and it allows as well to, I mean, we are among always the first to how to say, advocate and to mention the importance of network, but in this particular context, I think that network have been even more important to, you know, keep the link and break the isolation as well, that you know, in whatever field we are. And also this question of access to resources, because your webinar, for instance, were also open. I mean, we see as well with this conference that it can be open, so it's, I don't like to say the advantage of the context, but somehow there is a kind of access to resource and to information and to connection that would have not happened the same way. At the same time, and it was noticed as well as one of the key challenges in our discussion. So here I am just sharing, sorry, I did it a bit too in an early phase before, so this is just a picture, and after we stop sharing my screen, but this is the picture of the exchange that we had a bit more than 1 month ago among all this residency platform. And you see also more at the bottom Lisa, because of the time zone difference. There was you know, the kind of mistake that can happen when we have this Zoom meeting in different time zone. So she joined after, but yeah, so this question of opening resource and access is much more, I would say, important in this particular context. After, one of the challenges that we notice as well is also this overload of information, and that at the end of the day, to find your way through all this information and online conference and so on, it's sometimes even a bit scary. And after, it's also the question of who has access to this kind of information. So thank you very much. I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you very much, Lee. In fact, I will come back to you almost immediately. What I wanted to share, it's also a little bit what we discuss also in our group of residency organization and platform, and also some of the projects that organizations are working on at the moment. So what is very interesting as well is to see this vitality and energy to still continue. I will just name a few, and after I will go back to you, Lee, for Res Artis. Trans Artis will continue their online magazine, which is called Station to Station. So I think the link will be shared in the chat, and otherwise we can do it later. So the next issue will be focused on artist residency and the concept of communities. Some how to say, some network like the Alliance of Artist Communities in the US have also this you know, like this frequent online meeting, which is called Residency Connect, and you can find it also on their website. And they try, it's a way to stay connected with their member and their peers in the residency community. What is very interesting in the Alliance of Artists Community, it's also their, I mean, the strengths of their advocacy role, and the fact also that they are really working also deeply on some question related to diversity, inclusion. We talk in the previous talk about the question of bringing one's family, the children also, like in residency program. So in fact, on their website as well, you can check the residency program also in connection with that kind of information, also related to accessibility issues. So this is really much topic that they are very much working at. Interesting as well, it's TASA. Every year they organize for their members, so in Taiwan, some workshop, which can be like on governance, business model, and so on. I would say the usual important workshop, however, that we can have. One topic though, I didn't find so much in other meeting, but sometimes it's more like this kind of topic that is more done behind the scene, I would say. But it's also like more like psychological counseling because of some breakdown in the profession. And I think it's also a key subject to address. I mean, many people are talking about this, you know, like the mental health also issue, also in relation with the context, because we can say that we experience this global pandemic, but also depending on where you are in the world, the kind of condition you are in, there are also like huge impact, which will be also like felt in a longer term perspective. And I wanted also to mention the Artists in Residence network in Italy. This project was a bit stopped, but they are still working on it, and somehow it connects to some of the discussion today. They are trying also in a way to further develop their business model, and also to try to develop a project around local tourism. So how to engage also like more sensitive type of tourism in a different region in Italy, and connect them to residency places. And I think this is maybe also some of the other network like Résidence have also eventually this kind of experience. So Lee, maybe, I mean, of course you mentioned this huge and so important research that you are doing right now. I think we have never seen so many online questionnaire going on during the COVID-19 context, but you know, like we have never seen as well so much feedback from the sector, because it's also a way to share where the situation is, and maybe two things. I mean, after you can also, you know, like maybe develop another point you really want to highlight in this time. But one thing you say as well, like the results that you were mentioning this morning are related also like to the situation in May. So, I mean, every day somehow is different with this context, and everything can change from one day to the other. And there was definitely, and this is also one of the key points. So, and my question, sorry, I didn't finish. And my question is more like, what do you expect? Maybe also through your feedback, you say that 40% of the respondents were race artists members. So maybe also you can have some you know, some information, I mean, also from the member on, you know, new form of development. And it's a very difficult question, I know. And the other one, it's more like on this question of virtual residency. I think the point that you highlighted this morning, so also for people who are not here this morning, this question on the fact that more residency organizations are eventually, according to this survey, more willing to invest in or to implement that kind of you know, format eventually to tackle the challenge of this current context, or even in the, you know, a longer term future. And at the same time, the willingness of artists and cultural professionals to remain in this kind of contextualized experience, and maybe to wait but be in the real on-site type of residency. So I find it's a very interesting learning, even though it's you know, timely learning. So maybe if you want to comment on that, and maybe another point that you would like also to bring to the conversation here. Thank you.
Okay, that's quite a bit.
You came for a reason.
I've forgotten half of it already. I'll start backwards. Yes, the virtual residencies, I think, is really interesting. So like you say, and I think it is really important to underline, the information that we had back from this survey, it is a snapshot in time from May 2020. And the survey, the research project itself was always intended to be an 18-month to 2-year project. At the time that we were devising it, which was, of course, nearly straight away, it was around April, you know, we had some foggy notion that this might be a 3 to 6 month pandemic, and that things would come thick and fast, as it were. And of course, we now know that's not the case, and it's a longer burn. So, but it was always designed, the survey was always designed basically to be a pyramid, so that the first part of the survey was a snapshot, asked some pertinent questions across the board, and that the part 2 expanded out and really started to get into the detail of what those questions were, following up for another time snapshot, but also pulling out conceptual links that we were wanting to make throughout. And the third one being, with the benefit of some manner of hindsight about the pandemic situation, but also looking at actually what had occurred in terms of new business practices and new focuses and ways that changes had been made, which could be likely to be permanent or to shift the trajectory of artist residencies. So I think that's really important. It's a big project. We're very, very lucky to be working with UCL, University College London's global offices and their innovation department, which was fantastic connection for us. So and so we've been working with them in London, but also they have outposts all over the world. So Italy as well, like the people on the steering committee come from different places. So that's the idea around that. So it's always important to think about that snapshot. But in terms of that snapshot, so in terms of virtual residencies, that was pretty instantaneously the first thing that residency providers fell to or went to in terms of trying to pivot and trying to make things happen. It was all immediately online. And of course, with it comes all of these other questions. Firstly, it's an instant response / solution, but it assumes inequality. It assumes that everybody has equal access to technology. And there were conversations or feedback that we got from the survey that were instantly around that this might be a more sort of equalizing way to have residencies. But actually, as things have unfolded and what things that we will be investigating more deeply in the second survey, which will go out and we hope disseminate widely for being filled out in November, is there's a bit of a fallacy to that, in that not everybody has equal access to digital technologies. As we've seen, not everybody uses the same sort of formats, not everybody has stable internet, and actually in different parts of the world, the internet and access to it costs different amounts of money. So it is still not, I think there's a real danger to say that it is an egalitarian way of working, when in fact, like any way of working, there are inherent inequalities. So that's something that we need to be sort of looking through. The other really interesting thing, I think, with digital residencies and what we've seen is, shall we say, slow adopting or late adopting from an artist's point of view as opposed to organizations, is there is a real resentment that we saw coming through from the survey, because the survey, just to clarify for people who don't know, the survey was split in two. So it's one survey, but you identify yourself as either an artist or an organization, and then it branches off into two separate surveys. So from the answers that were coming back from the artists, there was a resentment on the assumption that their art and their art form is something that could easily be digitized. So it felt very much to some artists, be they ceramicists or dancers or for different mediums, that they were being sort of subjugated to this idea that, online digital art, that is the way of the future, and that is the only way of the future, because look what's happened, and you can't possibly do these things. So there was I think there was a very instantaneous reaction from artists that was very much, well, hang on, you're making this is a blanket response and it's a blanket statement. And so I think that is really interesting and should be unpicked further. And I think there's a lot of merit to that emotional response, and a lot of intellectual understanding sort of sat under that emotional response. From an organization point of view, I think it makes perfect sense. Obviously, organizations were looking to pivot to see actually how open they could be immediately. And so what we did have was, it was quite interesting that we were saying, from the survey, 55% in May of the respondents, the organizational respondents, were saying it was too early to tell about any ongoing impact, what it may or may not be. Yet, overwhelmingly, those organizations were already thinking about changing their process to digital. So at the same time that there's a sort of cautious, this might be temporary, there was a sort of an immediate, I don't want to say panicked, because not necessarily panicked, but an immediate response to change, like the adaptation was required in some way. So what will be interesting to see what the uptake actually is. This is completely unsubstantiated, but at the moment, my personal feeling or view is I wouldn't be surprised if digital residency uptake is a lot lower than originally expected back in May. It looks very much like actually there are a lot of organizations who have been open to it and have tried to put something in place, but that it's been put place more as an augmentation as opposed to a new programming. And actually outside of those artists who already were working in a digital way, whose mode was digital work, there is a lot to work out there. And so my feeling is that the results that we get from November will not show a necessarily massively huge uptake in digital residencies. But like I say, we will have to wait and see what those responses are. But I find that interesting. The other thing I find really interesting is the other thing that organizations identified about this pandemic being an opportunity for them to network and connect. And I mean, that were huge amounts coming back on that. So 48% of the respondents said that they would be focusing on the development of their new networks and contacts. 43% said that they would be focusing on their and their staff professional development, training and skill sharing. Like that is overwhelmingly has been a priority. And I think for a lot of organizations, especially a lot of smaller residency organizations, it's something that's been an ambition, but the day-to-day reality of running residencies has always been front and center and taken priority over that ambition. And now where so many are in sort of mitigated circumstances and not able to do a lot of that day-to-day, that there really has been a focus on and a need for and an appetite for this connectivity and this this professional development. Like you say, it's true, there is a mountain of free available content there. It's very hard to put those things into your working day, and to also to make a decision about what is going to be useful to you and what isn't. But that's not stopping people from wanting to navigate that. So there, and I certainly have, I mean, just even personally, I feel like I have a lot more meetings now than I did a while ago, where you would be relying on 3 or 4 international conferences or in-person meetups to do the bulk of this, to carry the bulk of this network development on its shoulders. Whereas now when that's removed, actually it seems to be smaller groupings but more consistent. But like I say, I don't have stats on that. That's just my own personal experience so far. But I'm really interested to see the results from the second survey.
Yeah, and I guess we are very interested as well, and it will be also, I guess, feeding also our. We plan a new meeting with all this network and platform, and of course together with our Résidence. So it will be like toward the end of the year. So also like to, but it's true that this question. That's why I really also wanted to hear more about this point, even though it's still not how to say very fixed as a form of knowledge, but also like some form of feedback on this question of virtual residency, this question of network. I mean, maybe sometimes it sounds a bit, I don't know exactly who, I mean, I see here like we are a little bit more than 80, 90 people. So depending on where people are coming from, but it's true that sometimes this world of network and platform seems a bit abstract. But after once you are in it, and also it's also what is interesting, as you say, it's also like to see the internal power that you can find with network and access to resource, and also as a way to break isolation. I mean, it was particularly mentioned by our colleague from Taiwan, who say, I mean, for them, of course, there is a lot of resource already at the level of Taiwan, but it's an island. So, and the connection to the Asian region and to some international dimension of their project, it's so important and so crucial. And as Claire was mentioning this morning, for the moment, the borders are still closed. So at least to keep the exchange and to keep this space of exchange, it's also important. And this is also one of the key, at the same time, opportunities and at the same time challenge that was noticed in our conversation. I see that I just wanted to finish before we take also some questions. So don't hesitate as well to, I see 1 or 2 questions already in the Q&R little box at the bottom of the screen. I mean, for those who follow on the Zoom session, what I wanted to share as well is just maybe 3 or 4 final points on we started also this connection last year between Residencies and our Résidence network. This year also with all the different platform and network which were introduced. So Transartistes, TASA, Artists in Residence in Italy, and the Alliance of Artists Community in the US. And for the next step, I mean, what was mentioned, I mean, maybe 4 points. One is more like this interest definitely to share resources. So we are still in this question of access to resources. For instance, Boyana from Transartis was saying that they are trying also like as much as possible to update their resources. And we all know here, as far as network and platform of information are concerned, how challenging it's to update information, particularly in this ever evolving context. But, you know, beyond that, so for instance, they want to focus on, you know, delving into the mapping of residency in Ukraine, in France and in UK. And of course, with France, the connection with Résidence can be directly made as well. The willingness, of course, to delve more into this question of virtual residency, which may not be definitely the answer, but which can be also in some cases part of the solution. And there are interesting experiments which can be still shared. And also Résidence has this, had this project of nomadic residency of curators. So as far as I understood, it was also a few years ago. So a curator going in 4 different residency organization, part of the network of Résidence. So this concept of nomadic residency was also like kind of echoing some form of interest also like among the other network and platform that were gathered. So this is also idea that we will further develop. And last but not least, also on this question of governance and on this question of business model, who is funding what, how you develop your business model, depending also on where you are located in the world. I mean, it's not by surprise that, let's say, the Alliance of Artist Communities has this also format of business model, but still it's very interesting to think, you know, of the comparison between the business model in order after also to be maybe in a better position to further advocate for the support for this residency platform and network, which do so much in terms of database updates, upgrading the capacity of members to deal with this question of residency, and of course to better serve also the artist and cultural professional. I saw one a question from Vladimir de Vomas, and maybe Vladimir so it's a bit weird because we are in a webinar format, so you cannot talk, but you can share, I guess, if not done yet, also your platform, the Artists in TV Residency platform, because the question of Vladimir, it's is this one: do you know any networks dedicated to country like Africa and Latin America, for instance? It's true that usually in the network and platform that we share, I mean, there is this focus. It's not this focus, but there are more opportunities shared also in Europe. I would say as well, it's also linked to some funding streams and sources of, you know, like support. But maybe on this question of residency that are located outside of Europe, maybe you can share some information or maybe also feedback from the situation. I mean, even though it's, again, sorry again for this very broad question, but I think it's also good to be a little bit out of focus. We were a lot also on this focus on Europe in this afternoon, so it would be interesting indeed, as Vladimir mentioned, to look at situation in other world contexts beyond Europe.
I do know that Artopia in Mexico have been active for a very long time in terms of trying to get a sort of a Latin country network going, and I believe that they do have an informal one, but I'm not sure how developed that is at the moment and how far the reach is. But I do know that that has been a focus for Paco, the director there at Artopia, for quite some time. Insofar for Africa, I actually am aware that there's some work being done at the moment by the British Council, I believe, in trying to just start to do some basic mapping, but I don't know very much more about it. It is really, it would be rude of me to get into my inbox now, but it is just some information that came across literally like in my inbox in the last couple of weeks. So I know that there are sort of beginning shoots of trying to do these things. In the past, I know RÉSIDENCES has been involved in, because we've wanted very much to grow our membership in those areas. It had been particularly difficult to get accurate and up-to-date information on the African continent, just because of those funding structures and how things work. And we have a couple of we have some members on the continent, individual member organizations, which are listed on our website, but it is a small percentage. I think it's 3% of our membership is on the African continent. So there are particular challenges. I mean, there certainly is interest, and there has been in the past, but as we all know, with anything to do with networks that are living, breathing organisms of networks, is they need to be maintained. There needs to be a continuity to them to keep that information fresh, and it's very difficult to do that outside of a funding structure, because you really need to have either somebody on the ground, or you need to have some sustained support to do that. Firstly, to build up the conversations and the trust to get the information, and then to sort of keep that up to date. So that is quite a difficult thing, but there are some activities happening that I'm aware of.
Thank you very much, Lee. I also shared in the chat, so in fact the platform that is run by so also Vladimir, who asked the question, so the Artists in Residence TV platform, and the past years they have been doing a very good work on mapping residency program, particularly in Latin America. So it can be also, and the information is available in different languages, including Spanish, French, and English. So it's also good, again, to keep this connection between networks and platform of information. And I guess, yeah, this is also this question. I remember that I asked this question also to Boyana from Transartist about residency organization in Africa. And what she mentioned as well is that sometimes it's difficult also to find the information, because the information is also maybe not online, or not maybe for funding reason. For instance, you don't have like regular calls or opportunities. And also when you have international gathering, people are not always in capacity to come. So maybe that kind of online gathering can help, or what you do as well to decentralize some of your meetings. So not only in Europe, but also in Asia and different places in the world. And I just wanted to say, because it's also connected with one of the speakers that was part of the colloquium this morning, that so it's Bénédicte Alliot, who is the director of Cité Internationale des Arts. And next year we will, together with On the Move, we are planning a 3 days meeting on the 3, 4, 5 of May on this question of mobilities between Africa, but more with within Africa, but also with more an international dimension. So like trying as well to map more also the question of funding opportunities, and of course residency organization. And maybe this is one way also to start, is also to or to continue that kind of work and mapping, is also like to connect with residency organization. If I take the example of Art en Résidence, who some of their members have definitely also, some of them have also like some partnership in Africa. So it's also a way to connect and to put more visibility to a residency organization beyond Europe. I am checking if there is more question. Yeah, and also there is, thank you again, Vladimir. Indeed, there is a very nice initiative which is done by, in particular by Pao Kata in North Africa, and so I am also sharing the website here. So there are initiatives, and after it's also how to connect the dots and how to also highlight their visibility. I don't know whether there is a last comment, or maybe a comment. I don't know whether Chloé, on behalf of Art en Résidence, you want to comment or have a question, because it was So if you want it, it could be also possible. We have still a few minutes.
I will just say that, as Anne mentioned it this morning, that we are really also waiting to and interested by the second step of the survey of Lee. So we will be, we will wait to have a more result of that. And from the part of Art in Residence, we also did like the same kind of work with all our members to see what is going on. So we had two of them who were in a very bad situation due to the COVID situation. So our work as a network is also to make sure that what the member needs and to advocate for the members toward the public representation, so to the French Minister of Culture, to make sure that the difficulty they can have in an individual, I mean, each structure itself can be relayed to the French Ministry. So it's what we are doing right now.
Thank you very much. So you see, Lee, a lot of pressure is now, you know, like on Residences, and if there is also, of course, I don't know how it will go, but maybe a second survey and online questionnaire, of course, all our networks and platforms can help also to disseminate them and encourage more people to answer them, because we know that we are all overloaded with questionnaire and survey, but at the same time, they are really key. And Chloe, you point out also a word I wanted also eventually to really be part of my small conclusion is this question of advocacy, because the more argumentation, the more feedback we can also collect from the sector, and as much as possible in its all diversity, depending on also our outreach, be it at the level of a country or more internationally. So the more argumentation, facts we can collect, you know, the more we can also advocate better for the overall question of mobility, but also for the particular sector of artist residency organization. Maybe I don't, attends. Maybe no, there is no, there is a question to Lee. So this is from Olivier. In France, residence programs are taken in consideration by professionals, but also by government as a relevant category for cultural policy. But is it also the case elsewhere in other areas? Are they equally recognized in different cultural policy, or is it difficult to make it recognized in some country or even at the level of continents? So basically it's true. And that's why I say also in my presentation of Avec en Résidence, I think the question of the charter is a very interesting, I would say, tool of reference and also evolving. But as far as the content is concerned, it's true that it's also related to some regulation or some form of support that you can have more in a French context. I don't say that everything is ideal, but of course it's much more ideal than in many other contexts where basically artists have to pay for their residency program. So maybe like this unbalance and this question, which came also in the conversation before, we are not in an equal world. So how to also work on this fairness also as far as the residency field is concerned?
Yes, it varies wildly, especially in terms of that idea of governmental recognition. So I would say, in fact, France is doing very well internationally in terms of its outlook and its understanding of the importance of those international collaboration and what that means culturally. Many other countries, not so much. So it really does vary wildly. One of the things that that came back through the survey was actually how limited financial support was to residency organizations, purely because residency organizations were not recognized or did not fit in any sort of neat pockets of arts and cultural support or other governmental support. So we had, I believe, just double check, but 17% of our respondents, well, 17, were able to access any sort of funding to support themselves during the pandemic. And this has been put down to various things around how they're constituted, because residencies themselves are incredibly varied. So some organizations, because you could be dealing with, if it's international residencies, most definitely you're dealing with residential premises, or you may be having an organization that has a separate agreement elsewhere to house those artists, or it could be live work. So the things as simple as zoning, being able to apply for regular business rates, all of these things which seem very minute and dry, they are dry, but they're incredibly important in terms of building up a picture. And building up that picture of legitimacy. And that is something, for example, in terms of advocacy, we talk about in a general sort of superstructure way about advocacy, perhaps whether it's with, you know, at European level or at international level, about the importance of international engagement. But for many of our members and for many residencies internationally, actually, it's the more micro that is more important. It is about advocacy and creating a language and a structure that resonates with local councils, that resonates with a local city, that resonates then possibly with national funding. Because actually what a lot of organizations can do is to try and align themselves to the superstructure, but what they miss is all this section in between, and this is where organizations are falling between the cracks, because they're not recognized as the type of organization that they need to be recognized as at a local level. So, and most of the funding, we've seen that the funding that is available is predominantly available locally and nationally. There is very, very little funding available internationally for residencies, like incredibly small amounts. So you really have to look at that alignment of where you physically are in the world and what those local governmental structures are, and start from there. And I think that is probably one of the overwhelming areas for improvement and internationally for residency organizations.
Thank you very much. I think we are reaching the end of this 1 hour session. So I am also conscious of the time, because for some people, you know, we have also curfews, so we have to be careful with our life after that. So thank you very much. There is, I just wanted to mention that there was also some question from Rochad, but I think we will make more the connection with you, Lee, because they are more connected also maybe at the level of ACME. There is also a question by Philip about where to find support and funding about a nomadic residency with different artists from Europe and connection in Asia, in Australia, I mean part of Asia Pacific. Here I don't promote so much On the Move, but I guess On the Move funding guide that I put in the chat can be also a good way to start, also like to identify beyond this question of residency also mobility form of support. And as we saw very much into some experience today, more than ever, I guess it's about knitting the project depending where you are and which kind of partnership you can find. So thanks again very much to you, Lee, to be with me, so that I feel less alone to present. And it was very good also to come back on some of the learning of this survey, because definitely it's a great piece of work still in development, which will also connect to future discussion that we will have with Art en Résidence and our other colleague from national and international platform. And also if there are some of you who are also present here, I mean, we can also connect. I just would like to finish with 2 points before I pass the word to Chloe for the final conclusion of the very long but very enriching day that you proposed to this colloquium. I just would like to say, yes, indeed, France is doing sometimes very well, I mean, very broad sense, as far as cultural policy and support compare, let's say, with other countries as far as mobility is concerned. But we could see as well that for art en résidence, it's quite a challenge to support, I mean, to be supported also, like in terms of business model. They work mostly on a voluntary basis. So this is also something to look at in our exchange and comparison of system and how to strengthen the network as well. And indeed, this question of advocacy is more than ever important. So I guess we can also like share, you know, like the learning that we can have at different level of competencies and different, I mean, country level, international level, for instance. And the more argument we have, the more we can also support the concept and the idea of residency organization. There is a lot of talk about the question of mobility and this concept of deep mobility, how to engage. We heard a lot about that also today, about duration, you know, like longer, more connection with local context, but it comes as well with a new format of funding, and maybe the residency organization and residency program are still a very interesting laboratory for that. So thank you very much. Thank you, Lee, again, and I pass back the word to Chloé.
Thank you very much, Lee. Et merci beaucoup, Marie, pour cette très belle présentation. On aura fait le tour du monde un peu ce matin, encore cet après-midi et là à travers tous les réseaux. Donc voilà, je clôture donc ce dernier moment de partage pour la journée.